Okay, so I'd like to think back to 1999 when the first Star Wars film came out. And by first, I mean actually the fourth, um, which is the first episode. It gets a little confusing in the terminology. I slip up if I don't think about it. But when Star Wars was coming out, it was a very exciting time. I was in ninth grade. I was just coming out of middle school. I'm the down-sloping end of a huge Star Wars literature kick, and desperately wanting these movies. I was ultimately disappointed by the new ones, but before they came out, I was excited. 1998, I was, absorbing all this like Star Wars material that was just pouring out, and you just had to wait for May, because all Star Wars movies come out on May. That's how I know it was May. It's not that I remember that I was waiting for May. It's that all Star Wars movies come out on May 19th, almost universally. You can look it up if you don't believe me, but the anticipation. It was like waiting for Super Christmas. Better than waiting for Christmas, because by that point I'd internalized a very healthy dislike of holidays, particularly religious holidays, which continues to this day. I'm kind of grinchy that way, but oh man, it was just great. And they were coming out with these Star Wars books and promotional material that would tell you about characters and stuff like that. And one of the things they came out with were these books, and I don't know why. Well, I suppose I do know why I have them, but they're terrible and trashy, and I can only say that I was just starting high school as an excuse. But these things, they're Star Wars journals, told from the point of view of one of the characters. This one's Anakin Skywalker. This one is Padme Amidala. They're ghost written, obviously. They're ostensibly by the characters, but we really believe that they're keeping a journal. I don't know, maybe the Queen was taking a journal, but Anakin certainly not. I mean, I bet the kid couldn't even write. The Anakin one is written by Todd Strasser, who I've never heard of, and the other one is by Jude Watson, who, if you recall, wrote the one of the Jedi Apprentice ones. I think it was. I don't even remember those titles. They're shit. Don't even bother remembering them. I only bring them up because they're sort of indicative of the sort of stuff that was around at that time period, that any sort of rabid person could, go out and find. This is the novelization of Star Wars Episode 1 by Patricia C. Reed. Patricia C. Reed is notable because she wrote something called the Enchanted Forest Chronicles, which was humor. It was a humorous take on fairy stories, on fairy tales. You'd have like a very self-aware meta version of, Sleeping Beauty or things like that. And it will happen. And she wrote them before it was cool to do so. So before Shrek, before Hoodwinked, all of that, Patricia C. Reed did it first and better. But this, long after she'd completed that series, popularity fading as a writer, I don't think she's much around anymore. And in 1999, she wouldn't have been that popular either. This was more of like a early 90s, late 80s phenomenon, if she was ever even that popular. This book is well below her writing level. I mean, she's not as good as I know she could be. But I don't even want to talk about that one. This, however, this has all the problems that the movies do. It's a novelization, it's based off the script. There are other places that have discussed this much better than I can. But I do want to talk about novelizations. I think that novelizations are probably pretty hard to write. This is written by Terry Brooks, by the way, whose name, if you're interested in fantasy, you should know. I've never read any other book by him, but I'm told they're all right. There are no defects in style that I can figure out in this book, and I'm not even going to review it because, like I said, it's been done elsewhere and better, and anything wrong with the book you can just, anything wrong with the movie you can apply to the book. The novelization process, however, is what interests me right now. It's probably pretty hard to write, and the reason I'm saying this is because when we talk about or translating genres, not even genres, we're talking about translating the medium in which an art form appears. There are some transitions that do a little bit better than others. Books go to movies pretty well, and that's probably because of practice, but they do seem to adapt very well. Movies go to video games all right. Video games do not go to movies well. In fact, they go horribly. Comic books can go to movies. Movies, somewhat difficult to comic books, but a lot easier than the awfulness that is the video game movie. The reason I think this is, and this is a theory, is because of the different strengths of the art forms and the different perspectives that it brings. One of the reasons video games do so poorly, I think, is probably because the video game point of view is you. It is second person, what's known as the second person. You are literally controlling the character. You are in the action. You are going to the store. Movies, however, their biggest strength is to present a objective picture of the action. We know, that you're never inside anybody's head, but that allows you to do interpreting on your own. You can see an entire scene from a completely objective point of view, allowing you to create a picture on your own of the entire whole of the story. You very rarely see first person, which is I in it. Like, I go to the store is the first person perspective. You very rarely see that in movies, except in the Hitchcock point of view shots, which are either done from the point of view of the terrified victim going up the stairs or the monster creeping through the... That's rare. It can be done. I think the only movie I've ever really seen in second... Well, sometimes the second point of view in movies, you could say that it's the first person point of view in the movie is the Blair Witch Project or Cloverfield, those shaky cam ones. I'd almost say that what's that movie with the kids who get the superpowers and it's a shaky cam, but the kid uses telekinetics to float the camera around. I cannot remember what that movie is called, but that is almost second person, but it moves into third person very quickly using movies' natural strengths. The novel's absolutely best strength is being able to get inside characters' heads. You can get complete psychological pictures of every single character in the narrative. Roughly speaking, exactly speaking, there are 3 points of view that you can have a book or any story presented in. The first one is the first person point of view. That's, I go to the store, I plan to buy stuff at the store. It's common for novels. There are plenty of novels written that way. The Great Gatsby is an example of that, told from the point of view of Nick. Although, interestingly enough, Nick is not the protagonist. Even though he's the point of view character, and arguably the main character, he is not the protagonist of The Great Gatsby. Gatsby is, but we see all the events of the story through Gatsby. The second way of doing a novel or a story is the second person point of view. Now, second person is you. You go to the store, you go to the mall, you buy shit you don't need there. You should stop that. Now, this is very rare. I mean, it has been done. The reason it is rare, though, is because it comes off as a sort of insecure first-person perspective, as if the narrator of the story is too afraid of their actions to put themselves to omit being I. Instead, they project it on you. Oh, you are buying shit you don't need. It's not me. It's you. And so they avoid responsibility of their actions. It comes off as very insecure. And that can be used for an advantage for stories. But in short stories, it works a little bit better because it doesn't have to maintain this huge framework that a novel necessarily supports and must support to be successful. The most common point of view is the third person point of view in a novel. That's they went to the store, Henry went to the store, he went to the store to buy eggs. Henry regularly buys stuff that he doesn't need because Henry is kind of stupid. Not that saying anybody who buys stuff they don't need is not stupid. I mean, we all buy stuff that we don't need. We're all consumers. But Henry is particularly bad due to his excessive purchasing of alcohol. Now, there's also something called psychic distance. And psychic distance in a story is how close you are to your internal dialogue. But I better back up first because I've forgotten something very important. The first thing is, not all third person points of view are equal. There are the first person objective, first person limited, and third person objective, third person limited, and third person omniscient. Omniscient really shines in novels. This is the camera, the narrator who knows everything about the world. He knows what's going on in each and everybody's head in the story, and he can jump freely between them all. The big Russian novels, Crime and Punishment, for instance, is a good example of being able to jump everywhere, and it allows you to get an entire picture, a mental, both inside and outside picture of the story, so that you as the audience can know every single detail about everything that's going on. That's the most common. The limited point of view is almost as common. I don't think it's quite as common. And the limited point of view is where the narrator may know a lot of stuff about the world, but when he looks at characters, he can only look at the protagonist's point of view. That is to say, if we were looking at a character, we'd only know one point of view, and all the other characters would be actors whose motivations are unseen and unknown. Some books, particularly like Game of Thrones is a good example of this, employs a limited point of view, but every time it changes scene, it'll shift the limited point of view to a different character. And so it's almost a limited omniscient, which is kind of interesting, and it's fairly recent, probably a 20th century invention. Although the novel really isn't that old, particularly in the West, where we can trace it back to Don Quixote, while things like epic poems are like thousands of years old in terms of genre. The last one and the rarest is the third person objective, and the Maltese Falcon is the only one that I can really think of that employs this. But the Maltese Falcon, the third person objective is just the camera sitting there watching the scene. It may be tied to one person, or it may be able to float around, or it may be able to like teleport to different scenes, but it cannot see inside anybody's head. It can only report the facts as are. Now, the reason I bring up this is because if the novel's greatest strength lies in the third person point of view, and a movie is stuck in third person objective, when you take the third person objective and expand it, just bring it in, expand it, three-dimensionalize it to being either limited or omniscient, you run into a conflict of interpretation. The author of the novelization now has to interpret character motives in a way that the movie doesn't, but he has to also keep it true to the script. So now he has to assign points of view and opinions to every single character that he wishes to get into the mind of. This does not work very well. It's much easier to flatten out a narrative into objective point of view than it is to expand it. You can actually, if an author of a novel writes this novel an objective point of view and then tries to expand it later in another draft and does it clumsily, you can almost always catch that if you're reading it, and particularly in bad fiction where the authors might not be very good at rewriting. I feel that the weakest part of this book is that expansion, but a lot of novelizations suffer from this problem, is that the transition from movie into book is much harder than book into movie. And for some reason, I think it's the reason I just described. I think that's the reason why. Much easier to expand than it is to... No, much easier to contract than it is to expand. Yeah. The other thing I want to mention is that I've been watching the Clone Wars, and I thought I might as well watch it because it no longer exists, and I want to see why Star Wars fans are so angry at this. As I've pulled away from Star Wars over the years, I find that I've become more and more puzzled by vehement fan reactions. The hatred of George Lucas that's built up over the years puzzles me. And even though I'm a Star Wars fan, I was disappointed in the films. I don't think it's the end of the world. I've moved on. There's cooler, geekier things like grammar to worry about, and grammar is awesome, and you should love grammar. That did not just come out of my mouth. Anyway, the hatred for George Lucas puzzles me. Disney, however, has managed to piss off fans. They killed LucasArts. I think their exact quote was, "We decided to minimize the risk by taking away from by getting rid of internal development and concentrating on third-party development." Which I guess if you cancel all development, you've minimized risk. It's the same sort of philosophy that goes, if I turn off my computer, I will never get any viruses, which is true, but you probably should leave the computer on, especially if you're using it to make cool stuff. But anyway, LucasArts was killed. Star Wars Clone Wars was killed, and so I've decided that I'll go through Star Wars Clone Wars and see why fans are so angry about it. And the thing about Star Wars Clone Wars is it suffers a lot from the Star Trek syndrome, or Star Trek writing syndrome, which is Star Trek, particularly Voyager, but you see this in all of them, has no even writing curve. The episodes are neither really good or really bad. I think there's no in between. The writing is either terrible or excellent. And there's like a huge gray area where in Star Trek there's nothing. And I feel like the Clone Wars is like this: episode crap, episode good, episode crap, episode good. Just this line of just unpredictability. And anytime the bounty hunters are on scene, it's excellent. I get a little bored if it's Padme they're following around. The Jedi can be cool, but not always, and the Clone Trooper episodes are usually pretty entertaining, but they do sort of suffer from horrendous teamwork, yar, nonsense. But I've gotten to the point where Darth Maul, and this might be spoilers, so if you intend to watch the series, I guess turn off the YouTubes. But Darth Maul has managed to infiltrate through completely implausible means. And Darth Maul, by the way, should not have lived. He was cut in half, and I don't know anybody who can be cut in half and then live for as long as he did. I mean, he needed medical treatment. There had to be a medical evac sitting at the bottom of that hole when he fell down. But Darth Maul is cool, so I'll let it slide. The thing being, Darth Maul has infiltrated Mandalore. He's made a deal with the Death Watch, and he's betrayed the Death Watch. And I always wonder, why do people keep making deals with the Sith? Phantom Menace, the Trade Federation, apparently has some sort of deal with Darth Sidious. why? Sith always... In Knights of the Old Republic, the Sith obviously can't be trusted. So even as far back as Knights of the Old Republic, when there was still some sort of like Sith Empire going on and stuff, the Sith could not be trusted. So why do people make deals with them? I have got no damn clue. Darth Sidious, of course, has Darth Vader wipe out all the Separatists at the end of Episode 3. Darth Vader and his deal with Lando Calrissian, I'm altering the deal. Pray I don't alter it any further. It's just... These Mandalorians siding with Darth Maul. Like, what is going on with that? Do the Sith use some sort of force power to make people they talk to stupid? I mean, it's a very... It has to be force power, because the Trade Federation are greedy, like, awful people. They would never side with somebody who's so clearly evil. I mean, the Darth Maul looks like fucking Satan. I mean, he does. I don't understand why anybody would be... I mean, isn't that why the devil always comes in like a handsome form, so he can trick you? Like Palpatine, yeah, he's hiding his face, but maybe that's a Sith Lord thing. There's a lot of customs in the galaxy. Darth Maul looks like he's the fucking devil. Oh well. I will never understand. This has been Midnight Lit, signing off.